5 or 50 rogue comes and harasses you, if you do beat them, they're done.
You're going to restart.
And that's kind of cool.
Would you like to see this kind of system in play on Final Fantasy servers, like as an option?
I don't know that 14's really laid out well for it, but I assume that some of the other Final Fantasy games have been. You would have to tell me whether or not you think 11 would be a good fit for something like this. It sounds pretty intense because my understanding is 11 could get pretty dangerous. Mm-hmm. So can Classic. Watching people clear on Nixia, all the trash and clear on Nixia without anybody going down was awesome. It was awesome because I know how easy it is to lose people in there. Watching people go into Molten Core and expect nobody to die was awesome. But I just don't know that 14 is really set up for it. I think a complex gearing system helps. The ability to say, you can level past this range really quickly, but there is this piece of gear that's really good. If you get it to drop, that's great. In hardcore mode, you're going to slow down and get that gear before moving on. That doesn't really exist in 14. You're just kind of hanging out in the gear that's dealt to you. You're just hanging out with the abilities that are dealt to you. And I don't know. It just doesn't sound that exciting. So saying Horizon 11 has a hardcore mode, yeah, that seems like a better fit.
Well, and that's obviously community driven. And when it comes to Final Fantasy 14, I'm not saying and advocating that they turn that on for everybody, but it's it'd be interesting to say we've spun up this special server and it's got its own special rules. And it doesn't necessarily need to even be PvP driven. Because one of the things I thought it would always kind of be neat is because we talked about how the open world is dangerous in Final Fantasy 11. It is a place that it was designed for grouping up in the open world together. And it would be neat to see if they're well, you know what, we're gonna let you put your mouth, your foot where your mouth is, and say, do you really want this kind of play in 2023 in Final Fantasy 14? Here's a special server that it's no, you're not going to go out and solo any of these enemies in the open world. You want to bring friends, and just to see what kind of culture would be surrounded around that. What would that do with that server, and would it be full enough that people would be interested in taking part? What do you think?
I think one of the other things that's been asked of the WoW community is they've said, instead of a hardcore mode, something that might be more widely appealing is what if they made a nightmare mode of the world? Nightmare, of course, referring to the increased difficulty in the Diablo worlds where you have world tiers. I think that would be a better solution for Final Fantasy 14. I don't know that the world is scary to be in by myself. So saying I have to bring friends, I don't have to bring friends now and I could go without dying. So I would prefer them to say, what if we had an extreme and a savage difficulty of the world? I think that would be more exciting. And I would love to see that in 14.
Right, because it wouldn't even have to be
to play back through on New Game Plus.
Mm-hmm. And even to the degree of if we're just kind of taking different options. Okay, yeah, your character doesn't get deleted, right? We're not talking about that, but just having that aspect of the open world is going to push back on you, so that if you wanted to see what kind of the Final Fantasy 11 players have talked about, where from a culture perspective, one of the things that it's called kind of forced empathy. It's you see your friend, you're oh, this guy died and I want to res him because that's going to actually save him time and save him experience, because when I died, I lost experience. And so maybe not I deleted this character, but maybe back to the, oh, you leveled down.
Eureka Bajja, right?
Yeah, it's a 100% Eureka Bajja, but in the entire world, from the get-go, when you're stepping out into Limsa or Gridania or Ul'dah, into those fields, and it's oh, that fight was close. That was okay. Hey, you random person, we can survive this much better, much faster, and having that efficiency come in a way of breaking down those barriers again, as a single server option, to see if people truly want that. Because a lot of people like me talk a big game. We talk a big game. We're yeah, that's what I want. But then a game does that and we don't show up for it. And then you hear people make excuses. I see the same excuses made in the PvP community. Oh, this is going to be the game that really brings everybody together and it's PvP focused. And we've been wanting this all the time. And the game comes out and they're well, it wasn't perfect. So that's why the numbers are low, because it wasn't perfect. It's yeah, we knew it wasn't going to be, but we do know that probably 100 to 1, if not 1,000 to 1, people prefer PvE over a PvP MMO. And That there's nothing wrong with that, but I do think that whenever I talk to the PvP players out there, that they have an inflated sense of representation, maybe is the right word. I don't know at the end of the day. I just think it's crazy. Cosmo says 14 does not have the combat for a hardcore mode. What do you think?
I mean, I think that watching people clear top without a healer tells me that like there is different levels of people playing the game. I just don't know that the system feels good enough for that. So I would rather them go back and I think they do have the combat system to better lean into like higher difficulties. I just don't know that death is the right penalty to like decide is the great decider. I would rather see them say, can you clear something without getting any bones or any damage downs? Can you clear something minimum item level? Like, I think there are better restrictions than death. I just don't think that's their best foot forward as far as like, if I were to measure a person who has a higher caliber of play at 14 and maybe even some luck, I just don't know that death is the right decider, as opposed to something like Mario, where like death is definitely the right decider. Like death is the ultimate decider. So playing through Mario with no death, that you're like, wow, that's immediately impressive. Somebody saying, I played through all of Realm Reborn without dying. Okay.
Well, I mean, I think that when we talk about it, like I do think it has the combat, for that kind of hardcore mode of the world pushing back on you. You look at all the instance-based content, it's designed, it's balanced, it understands that there's going to be more than one person. Final Fantasy XIV's open world, as opposed to like 11's or like the older classic MMOs, is designed around whatever class you are, whether you're a white mage or, like a mighty warrior, both are the same healers. Whether you're one of those, you should be able to clear and be able to survive in the open world so that you can get to the destination, the quest. And then the instance content being that we know that it's balanced with 4 people or 8 people in mind, we can then have a content that scales to that. Now, I think the instance content has only gotten easier for the older content, but still, I think the battle system, they could have a rule set where all the enemies in the open world are balanced for 4 people at a minimum or something like that, so that it does challenge you from a solo perspective. If you went in at a level 16 in, Toto Rack or something like that, those enemies would put up a fight and you would feel, if not dead, challenged, so to speak. What do you think?
I don't know that the 14 combat system really lends itself to that from early on. Like when I watch level 15 gameplay in World of Warcraft Classic Hardcore, it's exciting to watch. I don't actually feel that way about 14. Mm-hmm. Like I like 14, and I think that 14 is like a great way to welcome in somebody who's never played an MMO and stuff for a lot of the same reasons I'm describing here. But like for the fact that they're both tab, target, global cooldown games, I just don't know that the combat system in 14 is intriguing at low level. Like, can you die? Absolutely. But that doesn't make the act of not dying like worth working towards.
So then, because like Framsey says that he wouldn't really want them to waste the resources on these kind of systems or server or something like that, would a better investment being kind of refining that leveling and that combat experience? Because we've talked about this in individual videos before about that early game, balance, that early game feel, especially as it relates to job and monetization and combat, depth. Would that be would you rather, like, if you were kind of agreeing with Framsey on a resource perspective, would you rather see them invest in the combat system itself as just like, theoretically spending Square Enix's dollars here?
I'd rather see the Unreal system be something where those fights don't come around one time and never again. They said those were going to repeat. They haven't done that. They've yet to repeat. So like, I would love to see that instead be something where it's like, hey, cool, we're picking up 2 or 3 things in Unreal each time. Hey, did you notice that starting in Shadowbringers, that stuff comes around into Unreal like literally 1 expansion later? So like all current stuff is Unreal, and then just like Duty Support, it just slowly catches up so that we just have more and more and more Unreal content. Like I would rather them pile the difficulty into the replayability element of 14 than try to spend a bunch of time spinning up a whole new mode. And I base that on the fact that like New Game Plus sounded like something that took them an enormous number of resources to do, and then it turned into something that had so few applications. Like it's not like a way I can level up alts. It's not a way I can really truly re-experience all narrative in the game, because while it is expanding, it is not all story in the game. So in some ways, like you're just better off making another character.